Okay, so thank you very much. I will fight the last presentation problems.
Your own mind as well.
Look, so again we have a problem with definition of NTA and TA. So one of the main issues here, of course, the state language. Of course, we know that a state establishes a state language. Even in Greek, we don't have a law saying that the official language is Greek. So it goes beyond this, because it's by definition Greek. And then you have a protection of a minority language according to different trigger points in history. So first of all is the international commitment. There's a bilateral agreement with the Ottoman Empire, for instance. Then you have Turkish in schools for Muslims. And then you have another agreement with Romania we are going to see. Then you may have nothing, so the state just ignores the existence of a minority language. So this is a spectrum of different possibilities. The important thing here is that, let's go to the first, to this. The important here issue is that Greece became independent in 1830. So it was, in that times, we were very, very strongly influenced by the legacy of what was experienced just before, or in parallel, because the Ottoman Empire still exists in that times. So the millet system, so the management of ethno-religious and linguistic otherness within the empire. As you know, Muslims are, let's say, first category subjects, and then you have the three millets: Greek Orthodox, Armenians, and Jews. And in the beginning of the 20th century, you have some others, like the Protestants and the Vlachs. So what is the meaning of this? Autonomy, non-territorial autonomy, high level. So you have the head of the community, which is a religious leader, and then you have autonomy among other subjects to education. So they do whatever they want as far as they pay taxes. This is a simple arrangement. So rich communities have big and nice modern schools. Poor communities have even nothing. Only the priest or the imam or the rabbi of the small community can do just a few lessons. So the time passes, and when Greece acquires new territories, so in 1830 Greece has has no minorities. There's one minority language very strong, Albanian, spoken by the Arvanites of that time, but they are already incorporated into the Greek national idea. So they fought for the Greek independence. So there was no question about minoritization of the language. So nobody was asking to have a kind of schools or whatever else. Could be seen today as a minority claim. So the first period of time you have a real minority protection is 1881, when the central Greece is annexed as a gift by the Ottoman Empire, through pressure, of course, by the big powers. And then we have organized communities, Muslim communities, and Jewish communities. And then we have real schools, minority schools. How they are organized? So here we see the influence of the millet legacy. So the Greek state has a predominance of the Greek language and the Greek Orthodox Church. The others are exactly as they were the reverse situation in the Ottoman Empire. So the Muslims and the Jewish communities, and then we'll see later on the Armenians, are under automatic protection by the state. As far as the Muslims are concerned, there's a bilateral treaty signed with the Ottoman Empire, and maybe it's one of the first of the kind of minority protection. They don't use the term minority at that time. And then the Jewish communities continued to have the status they had before, but under Greek law. So their religious community and schools, among others. So the role of the language is very important. For the Muslims, Turkish is the main language in Thessaly, in central Greece. But for the Jewish communities, we have Greek-speaking and we have Spanish-speaking, the Sepharad, or Ladino, or Judo-Espanol. So, but they were left alone to organize their own schools. And because of the annexation of the Ionian Islands to the west coast, we had important Jewish communities also in this period of time. Then we know through historical archives that they had very strong and important self-organizational structures and institutions. So schools existed also. So the territorial expanse, so 1881, 1913 is the most important because you have the new lands. I have a map, I think. Can you go further down to the slides, please? Here. So Thessaly is the central Greece here, Ionian Islands here, and then we have the new lands, all these. It's interactive, really. So I can move it up and down.
Don't touch it.
Don't touch it. So the new lands, after the Balkan Wars, as you were very well known, Greece acquired this part that belonged, of course, to the Ottoman Empire, not Thrace yet, and then the islands of the eastern Aegean and Crete. So there was an important Muslim population in Crete, in Lesbos, and all parts of Macedonia and Epirus. So what happened to them? And there was, of course, a very strong Jewish community here. So more than 55% of the population of Thessaloniki was Jewish, Spanish, Judo-Espanol speaking. Things that when we're talking about this in Greece today, they don't know that when the Greek army arrived Thessaloniki, the population was Spanish speaking. It's a bit. So what happened to them? Immediately, and this is important, Greece signs an agreement with the Ottoman Empire, again, the same style, to preserve the Millet style autonomy of the communities. So the Mufti is head of the community, and among others, schools. In which language? Turkish. The only interference by the state is that they had to offer the Greek language lesson by a Greek teacher. This was the only change between the previous situation and the next. There were also Vlach speaking, so a language, Latin language very similar to Romanian, in this period, so around these areas. So what happened there is very interesting that when they signed the final agreement, final treaty, by the end of the Second Balkan Wars in Bucharest, so there's a special protocol between Greece and Romania, that Romania is seen as kin state of the Vlach of Greece, and they had the right to preserve, of course, their institutions as far as religion and education is concerned. So they have church in Romanian and schools in Romanian. So what happened among the community was split. So the majority of the community followed the Greek plain public schools, and in about 27 villages, and in Thessaloniki, some other, in Yanina also, they had the schools financed by Romania. So there were the pro-Greeks or Greeks and the pro-Romanian Vlachs. And this is very important because this happened all over the Balkans. So the local Vlachs were split into the predominant national ideology and the influence exerted by Romania. So this is a huge discussion about ethnicity and how this developed. Okay, so the Greek state also preserved the Jewish communities. So we have in all big cities of northern Greece and Crete important Jewish communities that they had their own schools. What we see through the archives now, because after the Holocaust, so 30 years later, we don't have any presence anymore, or we have very minimum. We see that the schools and the minority schools there, so in the mid-war, in northern Greece, as far as the Jewish communities are concerned, are of three types. All community schools, so funded by the community, or run by Alliance Israélite, so a very important Jewish organization based in France, and the language was French, so the French is the language of these schools, and public schools, public state schools, so the Greek is the language, so the Spanish or Hebrew is the language of the community schools, and French is from the schools run by Alliance Israélite. So we see that we have here we have a variety of different options, and of course to follow A, B, C category means that you are a member of a high class, rich, or poor or medium, and this is changeable through the time, and it shows that language is very important, because we know French was a lingua franca, very important language to communicate with the other Jewish communities. So here is something unexplored, because with the occasion of this paper, I started checking again the archives, and you see things that, of course, there's a huge bibliography on Jewish communities in Greece, but the language, the position of the language, and the treatment by themselves and the state is, I think, is important. So can we go? Okay, so the Jewish communities, so what we are saying here, the three different types. Of course, after 1945, so after the Holocaust, there were only two major communities in Greece, in Athens and Thessaloniki, and that's why we have only two elementary schools. So there are, in Athens, a community school, and Thessaloniki is was run by the state in both cases, but then now are private community schools. So,
in which language?
They have Greek, and then they have Hebrew, and they have some no Ladino anymore. So nobody speaks anymore Ladino in Greece. So they are all Greek speaking, and Hebrew is, highly symbolic for the history and the religion, but no one, of course, speaks. So the Armenian communities again fit to this exemplary implementation of the Millet system, because, however, they are Christians. They have their own church. So if Jews and Muslims are outside the assimilation process among the non-Greek speaking Greek Orthodox, I will explain this. So assimilation process is that among Greek Orthodox, they may speak another language like Vlach, Slav Macedonian or Bulgarian or whatever else. They are under the assimilation tendencies by the society and the state. But if you are a non-Christian, like Muslim or Jew, the state and the society do not attempt to assimilate you. They don't like you maybe, but they don't want you to become Greek. However, the tank from where you push people into the Greek national ideology, so the Greek national community through language and religion, are those who do not speak yet. So they are assimilable, I would say. And that was what happened. Through the 3 or 4 last generations, the number of non-Greek speakers among the Slav, Macedonian, Bulgarian, Vlach, and Arvanite speakers are less and less. So the Armenian communities had already their status of self-organizational structures, and they kept it. And now we have one community in Athens and one in Thessaloniki. In Athens, they have their own community school. In Thessaloniki, they closed down. And they closed down, they had more than 10 schools in northern Greece. They closed down because, after the civil war, about half of the population preferred to go to the Soviet Armenia to build the national country or whatever. Can you go? So the Muslims is very important, and I have explained that they kept this post-Millet system or neo-Millet system, and the development of this ends to what is happening now in Thrace. Can you go up to the map? Here. So in 1920, you have Thrace annexed by Greece, Western Thrace. And after the unfortunate Greek-Turkish war in Middle and Asia Minor here, there was a notorious population exchange conducted between Greece and Turkey. So all Muslims had to go to Turkey, and all Greek Orthodox from Turkey to Greece. So we don't have any community left after 1924 here, but only the one in Thrace as an exemption to this population exchange, as a counterweight to the Greek Orthodox of Istanbul. And then after 1947, where the Dodekanis Islands, Rhodes and Kos were annexed to Greece after the Second World War, then we have two small communities of Muslims. Also, that's why today we have, as indigenous Islam or old Islam, we have only here and here. So, and we have the Treaty of Lausanne. So the Treaty of Lausanne is a treaty of 1923, a special chapter of which governs the institutional autonomy of both minorities, in Turkey and Greece. The treaty doesn't name a territory. That's why another tricky issue for our discussion, NTA or TA, allocates rights on the basis of religion. That, of course, is very Millet style. It's not a modern approach to grant you educational rights in your language when you don't ask the language, about the language, but you ask about the religion. So it allocates the rights here for the Muslims of Thrace. This is the way the Greek state understood it. And the language was Turkish. However, there were two small sub-minorities of the Muslim minority that speak Pomaks or Bulgarian language, and the Romanes, the language of the Roma. But there's no education, so there's no any kind of recognition for these two other languages. So from there on, we have recognition of some linguistic rights, and the educational rights are the most important. So we have a very well-established system of schools, elementary schools, and second, middle and high schools. Regarding Turkish, okay, so there were a few schools here also, but they were not under the Treaty of Lausanne. So the Treaty of Lausanne was implemented only in Thrace, not here. And then in the crisis between Greece and Turkey in the 70s, before the Cyprus, they closed down the schools for Muslims, where Turkish was a language not of education, as linguistic matters, as a counter measure against the closure of the religious school of Halki. But it's very complicated, the Greek-Turkish relation, but the effect that it was that we don't have any more Turkish here. So we have only in here. Can we go back to continue the slides? So, one very important issue is how we define those who have the rights under the Treaty of Lausanne. And in a recent, it was 15 years ago, someone was not living in Thrace, so asking to have the privilege given by law to enter the Greek university with special positive measures by the Greek law for Muslims. So to to enhance a little bit the social disadvantage of Muslims. And then the court said this: only those who are descendants of those who were exempted in 1924 from the population exemption have the right and live in Thrace, so have a TAN and NTA criteria. So if you are, but you don't live in Thrace, you don't have the prerogative. So you have to live in Thrace. So the Treaty of Lausanne is implemented, is active only in this territory on a personal basis. So that's why here I think is a very, important borderline example, the whole system of protection. Can you go down? So the Muslims of the Canary Islands is a kind of semi-millet non-minority, so the development was like that, so we don't have the Turkish language in schools anymore. The reciprocity with Turkey also affected the language. So we see here an external factor. And here we see how the situation went. So the Vlach had a kin state, so Romania, because of the position of Romania with Greece in the Second Balkan War. And this was until 1974, but because of some Vlach collaborated with Italian forces during the occupation, then and because Romania became a communist state, so cut the links to the outside world, so the Greek government said, okay, we don't need anymore these minority schools, so we don't have them. So minority schools for the Vlach ended, closed down in 1947. So that one, I have to say, there was absolute invisibility of this language vis-à-vis the Greek state. Although the first president of the Republic in the 20s was Albanian speaking, a lot of generals or the first ministers were Albanian speaking, but nobody cared about the language. So we see the ideological component of the language. So nobody wanted to claim any rights for this. And then the Slav-speaking population, so the Slav Macedonian or Bulgarian, is a very, very important but very complicated issue now to say anything about this, because the Greek state introduced the term Macedonian just to counterweight the Bulgarian influence. So even in the census of 1913, you may not know this, because it's very well pushed away from the Greek bibliography. There was the question, what's your mother tongue, Macedonian or Bulgarian? But this lasted only 10 years, only 20 years. So only, and this because of the bilateral approach to Bulgaria within the League of Nations in the mid-20s, there was a protocol signed between the prime ministers providing for education in Bulgarian. But then Serbia reacted, and then the Greek parliament reacted. The agreement was never ratified, so this is a failed opportunity to have schools or education in what? And this was a big discussion. So the Greek government, under the pressure of the League of Nations, produced the notorious abecedar in Macedonian or Bulgarian, or they call it Slavo-Macedonian, in Latin alphabet though. So to push away all the kin states from the north. But this was failed, never was established. So the invisibility, legal invisibility of all these languages meant road to assimilation. And this was the political program. Okay. So what is happening now? As you know very well, we have two legal instruments, the Framework Convention and the Charter for Minority Languages. Greece signed, paradoxically, in 1996, the Framework Convention, never ratified, of course, never ratified the Charter. As you know very well, in the Council of Europe, was together with France and Turkey against any discussion about all these instruments. So Greece remained outside the European multilateral system of controlling minority languages, among others, and remained with Turkey to this bilateral, old-fashioned, Millet-style system through the Lausanne Treaty. Can we go? So the migrants, because so we have other languages too, spoken in Greece, but of course all of them are absolutely invisible, because linguistic rights for migrants do not exist. There was a law about multicultural education, but it's the other side, so it's assimilation towards Greece is to facilitate, of course, this is the one positive aspect, facilitating migrants to learn Greek, but not at all facilitating migrants to learn their own languages or having connection to their own culture. So we don't have anything. We have just the fundamental rights to education, so that, of course, children go to school, but the school is only monolingual Greek. Can we go? So this kind of timeline, so we see Turkish Muslims for Thessaly, central Greece. So it here shows where there was active linguistic rights for the education of minority. Turkish of the new lands in the northern Greece. Thrace, so it's the only one having up to now among Thrace. Dodecanese stopped here. Okay, this was another exceptional case, and we'll talk about the Albanians of Epirus during the mid-war. The Vlach, during this period of time, they had their own schools and Jewish communities. Until now, okay, there is one, as I said, there are two schools only. And the Armenian school, but there's only now only one school that exists. So the others, we don't have anything. So this can go. I think I'm finishing here. This is the what? So, I think some of these conclusions fit to other countries too, of course, that speaking a minority language in many cases means stigmatization. So you are seen in a negative perspective from the state and the majority. And this is, of course, is established on hegemonical terms, majority, minority. So the Greek, non-Greek speakers, of course, they have overlapping ethnic and national or linguistic identities, and the state, through ideological lenses, of course, opts for the one or the other solution, to ignore, absolutely, or to organize and establish an educational system for their own language. Of course, this has to be seen within the international context. If you have a war, you may have a king state that you give as a counter to counterbalance the situation. You offer minority rights to people that are seen as kin to the other power. So always, and Greece was within this game of balancing interests, especially in the beginning of the 20th century. Immigrant languages are invisible in Greece, and this is very problematic. And still, as I said, the languages spoken by Christians, Greek Orthodox in Greece, are invisible, or very difficult or very sensitive to talk about the Slav Macedonian language, or even the Vlach language or others. So why? Because it's very tense, the dialogue and the perception of the other languages. So the language by itself is a carrier of ideology and political tensions. And I think this is something to consider, and when this is connected to territoriality, that creates a connotation to national danger or threat by a neighboring country. And I think this was, and this is the challenge, to demystify this discourse and to go further, maybe through these multilateral agreements. And of course, Greece is immature to go through this dialogue and stick to the old-fashioned millet-style protection. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for this, I would say, comprehensive overview of the linguistic policies in Greece over the centuries even. So very, very interesting. Now I open the floor for a couple of questions, Ben. Yes, Marie.
Konstantinos, thank you very much for this. I really enjoyed it because you filled up some gaps of my personal knowledge, and it is a really good retrospective of how languages were in Greece and the travel of the languages, the fate of the languages. So I really certainly enjoy reading your paper, that's for sure. So thank you for this. Of course, we know how the status of the Greek government, the state, is now towards the languages of minorities, immigrants group. Do you think that there is a chance that this will change in future? We live in a very globalized world. Travel is free, freedom of movement, lots of immigrants coming out of the country or entering, a lot of ethnicity are mixed. There are still little class groups living in certain territories. Assuming so. Do you think that there will be a different view in near future or maybe far future, your personal view of whether this will change, the perception of the Greek state will change towards, of course the Greek language will be preserved, this is part of history and a very important history of this part of the world, but would that change how they perceive other languages, taking apart whether it is a threat of security or not? Just, this is a cultural thing, it is a distinction of a group. Do you think that that will change?
Not easily, because as you said, globalization brings together a lot of ideas and languages and cultures within a state, but at the same moment, this is perceived as a threat. So sometimes, the more globalization you have, the more resistance, in domestic resistance. You may be open to have, I don't know what kind of export-import of ideas and other experiences, but to preserve your own territory. And you know, we have more and more languages through migrants, but you don't see anything. I mean, even these people do not claim. They are okay with a small Sunday school for, I don't know, different languages of the Afghanis or Pashto or whatever. Who is going to claim now when they have huge problems with a mosque? When there is a huge problem with a mosque in Athens, in other parts of Greece. At the same moment, you have 300 mosques in Thrace. So nobody cares about Islam in Thrace, but they care 1 centimeter outside Thrace. Why? Because they see it as a threat. So these people who are mostly Muslims, when they cannot claim the prayer house, which is very important to them, who cares about the other stuff, elements of their identity? And as far as the minority languages in Greece now, the discussion is stopped. There was a very important discussion until 15 years ago, but because of this globalization and migration and refugees, and the European discussion, and the agreement with the name with the Macedonian, we say, okay, you have the name, but don't talk about Macedonia in Greece. One small corner of this discussion. So nobody says anything. And when we open the discussion, say, okay, why you are talking about minorities now in Greece? This is your problem. We have refugees coming every day. So globalization in that perspective is a threat. So, unless half of the population is children of mixed marriages, and one day everybody say, who cares about this? Let's have it. But I'm not optimistic for the near future.
Any other question for Konstantinos? If you allow me just one final comment or question. It's fascinating, but I'm just wondering what your concluding remark would be. It seems from your presentation that you claim that Greek linguistic policies are heavily influenced and still driven, even after a century, by Millet system influence and the old international law model of treatises, rather than any other new model, including the most recent documents under the UN and the EU, or generally European system. How can Greece continue to go according to the old international law system, whereas we live in 21st century? I mean, is there any kind of debate from, in the perspective of international law experts from Greece or within Greece about this? Because to me, it seems very anachronistic.
To me also. Only a few ones. Look, they don't follow the Millet system consciously. There is a genealogy of this, so we have the Treaty of Lausanne, so they stick to the Treaty of Lausanne. There's another political issue, an argument, don't touch the Treaty of Lausanne, because if you touch the Treaty of Lausanne, you may lose some other issues like the borders, because the Treaty of Lausanne has 100 different things to regulate. And because of Turkey that says, okay, let's check again the Treaty of Lausanne, say, okay, don't touch the Treaty of Lausanne. So containing minority rights there goes together. Don't touch this. It's anachronistic. It's not only the schools. Okay, there are some problems with the schools, but the most important problem is the mufti and the jurisdiction of the mufti. That comes from the Millet system. That you don't have it in the rest of the Balkans because of the communist period of time that swept away all these Millet remnants of the past. So it's very political and it's very ideological political now, not to align with a new modern system of multilateral concert on this. And what we have, the Treaty of Lausanne. So nobody dares to touch the Treaty of Lausanne, nobody dares to jump over the new system. And I know my experience because I was very close to this signature of in '97, because it lasted only 2 months, the euphoria that, okay, finally we changed the system. 96, I think 96 was the signature. And then, because one minister believed in this, but immediately his political party, a group of 22 deputies said, if you ratify this, the convention, we are going to abstain. So you are going to lose the government. Can you imagine? Just for this, create this. And since then, there is no discussion about this. 25 years, absolute silence. As scholars, who are 2 or 3, maybe 5, writing some articles saying maybe you to reconsider to have a more modern system.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.